friend. She a real bad. And I don't money. She don't need no money for get to be great. Best friend. She a real bad. Drop out outside.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Let's edit this recording. Is it 8? Is it 8? It's 2 minutes. Ready and
my best friend. She a real bad. Got her own money. She don't need no money dance floor. She had two to be.
hi, you guys.
That's my best friend. She a real bad.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. I hope you can hear me. I've muted you all to start, but kicking it off with some of my best friends on Book Club Thursday. How are you guys? Okay, let me turn it down a little bit. Let me tune it down. Hi, everyone. Okay, I can see Christine. I see so many people. I see you guys all piling in. I'm going to spotlight Christine there. Hi.
Oh my God, I'm so excited to be here.
Oh my gosh, we are so excited to have you. Okay, let me see if I can find, because there's just so many people in here. Let me see if I can see Joe. Joe, can you raise your hand? I'm sure you're in here. She's coming, guys. She's coming.
It definitely is. And
let's see. I'm letting everybody in. There's a bunch of people in here, you guys. I love it. I love it.
Tanya, be right back. I'm going to check my phone and make sure she isn't.
Okay. Hi, you guys. I've got everyone on mute to start just to get going and stuff because I'm so excited for today. But you know how we do. We'll kick it off and then we'll have everybody on mic and ask questions and talk. People are definitely filing in, but welcome to another epic Tanya Time Book Club. I can't tell you how excited I am to be here. I dressed up for all of you. I put on some makeup. I put on some lipstick. I have my wine. So for those of you who have taken off your videos, welcome. For those of you who have not, no problems. I hope you're in your pajamas. I hope you're unwinding, and it's just all about having a good time. You can still speak. You don't need to take your videos off, but it's great to have you, Christine.
I was like, did someone say wine? I believe I heard that.
We love a glass of wine in this group. We love a glass of wine. We love a glass of water. There's never any judgment at all. Okay. Right now I've got Christine spotlighted for a minute. I'll spotlight myself, and we are also waiting for Joe, but we've got some time, you guys. Oh, Christine, first of all, I love this glamorous outfit you have on right now.
It's just the puffy sleeves. That's what does it.
It's on the bottom, but I get it. I
know, exactly. She said that you haven't let her in yet.
Okay, hold on one second, you guys. Oh yeah, admit all. Here we go. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I'm admitting a bunch more people from the waiting room, so come on in. Okay, so we've got a packed crowd right now. So happy to have everyone. Okay, where's Joe? Oh, I see you. I see you. Awesome. I'm gonna just pin you as well so that I can find you easily. Both of you, hold on a second while I just get organized. You guys know how it goes with a little bit of housekeeping stuff. It's always the fun.
I'm returning my phone, my dead phone to the charger.
Okay.
Yeah, you do you. We're good.
Okay, I'm gonna spotlight Joe. I am gonna spotlight Christine when I find her again. I started off playing some best friend for us, you guys, because I really
loved it.
struggled add spotlight. So it should be, the two of you guys should be spotlighted. I don't know if I'm spotlighted as well. So somebody tell me if
I just see Joe and I spotlighted.
Okay, so let's spotlight myself. So it should be the three of us for now.
Yes.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, welcome, welcome to another Tanya Time Book Club. I am so excited to have you ladies here. We have had an incredible month reading your book. And I'm just going to go through a little bit of easy housekeeping so that everyone understands how we work. We have a lot of OGs in the place. We have a lot of newbies. So I just want everyone to get a quick understanding of how this works. We have been reading your book for the past 4 weeks. We've broken up the book and we have dived into all the details, all the thoughts, like super high level and super silly, super cry, super heartwarming. So we've had an incredible time together. And now we are so excited to have this dynamic duo that is here with us today so that we can pick your brains and welcome you to the book club. So welcome, Christine and Joe. Everyone is giving you a beautiful
thank you guys. This is so fun. We're so happy to be here.
Silent wave as we get started. So some housekeeping stuff. You guys, book clubbers, this is really your chance to interact. We've gotten a chance to talk amongst ourselves. And so we are more than excited to have you guys here. You're basically celebrities in our mind. So we're all a little bit geeked out. And this is actually the first time we've ever had a dual authorship. I was trying to figure out how to say that, or just two authors that have worked to pen a book together. So I think that's really exciting. We've got a lot to get through. And I just want to start off by saying, I'm going to ask a couple questions and then I kick it off to book club. So you guys, please raise your hands. You can ask questions in the chat. We'll field them both ways. We'll try to get through as many as we can. I know you guys have stuff to do and we don't want to keep you up all night. But for those of you who are joining, we'll ask questions. Please try to keep them as brief as possible. And then we'll give you guys the floor to answer as much as we can. And then after our authors leave, you guys know how we do. We have a little after party where we sit and talk about more things on the book, other books we're reading, pop culture stuff. I don't know. We can talk about everything from what you're watching on TV to Kim and Kanye. Who knows what comes up?
Well, that's a whole hour right there.
Right. The after party is always a good time. You guys can feel feel free to say. That's when we tend to digress into all sorts of topics. But I'm going to get started, and I'd love to just kick off and introduce you both. I'm going to start with Jo because I think she's at the top of your screen for most of you. Sorry, I'm trying to find my cursor here. Jo, awesome. So Jo Piazza, I have read actually a number of your books. So when I stumbled across this book, I was just like, this is incredible. Jo is a national and international best-selling author of many critically acclaimed novels, much of which have become in some of my top lists of books, including Charlotte Walsh Likes to Win, The Knockoff, Fitness Junkie, and How to Be Married. If you guys haven't read them, I almost think we should do them for book club. We might do a one-of for a couple of them because they're great reads and they resonated so much with me. So when you and Christine joined forces to write this, I was just I knew it was the book for me. So thank you so much. She lives in Philadelphia, which also you guys will understand why the book is set there with her husband and kids. So welcome, Jo. So happy to have you here. And Christine Pride is a writer, editor, and longtime publishing veteran. She's held editorial posts at many different trade imprints, including Doubleday, Broadway, Crown, Simon & Schuster, and she has published a range of books with a special emphasis on inspirational stories and memoirs, including New York Times bestsellers. So Christine, welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so happy to have both of you here, and let's dive into We Are Not Like Them.
Love it.
All right, ladies. I don't know where to begin with this because I think, and you know, our chat is super active. So if you guys are in the chat, we know, please drop your questions there, communicate with us as much as possible. But most people on I think the Zoom today have read the book, started the book, if not finished it. So I'm going to skip the synopsis, but I'm going to tell you about why I chose this book. And it's kind of deviated from our normal books. This book club started out of the pandemic because we were all locked up, going a little stir crazy. And I wanted to read books that were a little bit more uplifting. So when I suggested this to book club, I absolutely caveated this with, you guys, this is not our normal read. It's riveting, yes. It will draw you in it, but it was super emotional for a lot of us. And it forced us to really look at some of the things that we had endured, struggled with, either maybe talked about or not talked about during the pandemic. So it was a bold choice. And this conversation came up a lot as we were reading it. And I will say for most book clubbers, they gave a huge thank you. Because yeah, a lot of people said this was a story that needed to be written, especially from a fiction perspective. And this incredible narrative of having a Black author and a white author come together. And that is in part why I chose it, because I feel like fiction is a great way to create a safe space to have these conversations.
Amen.
Yes. So that, you know, there's always these ideas of like, oh, well, am I allowed to ask? Am I allowed to say this? And where can you truly have this conversation? So for book club tonight, I just want everyone to know this is a safe space. Like you can ask your questions. This isn't like, oh, you said it the wrong way, because this is kind of what we're trying to foster, those conversations. And I will also say, from a personal perspective, I am biracial. My mom is white from England. My dad is Black from Africa. They met in Canada, and I grew up, I'm just telling you guys how old I am. I'm 40. So we grew up, you know, I don't know what gen I am. I try to forget about it, but in a very—
You're in between. We're in between.
I think we're in between.
We're in between. I'm 41 and we're right on the—
So I think in a lot of us, we span a lot of different ages, but you understand there's a little bit of a difference. We're not as cool as the millennials. So we went through what Jen and Riley really did. And I have a ton of Black friends, white friends. And so a lot of us saw our experience in these characters. So I love to talk, y'all, but I'm going to try and zip it. I want to just start off with my first question to you guys. The title. The title, We Are Not Like Them. Can you tell us about, you know, where that came from and a little bit more, because as we read through the book, it changed so much. We pulled so much out of the title. So I'm just going to leave it a little bit open-ended to you guys. And if you guys can just give us your thoughts on where that came from, and we'll sort of digress from there.
Yeah, no. Well, first of all, can we say we are so excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this all week.
Me too.
It's really fun to follow kind of the discussion in the chat and everything that's been happening on Instagram, and then be here tonight with such a great group of people. So we're super excited to have this discussion, and, you know, and not to be too, I don't know, sentimental or woo-woo about it, but when Joe and I were writing this book, which we started in 2018, you know, we're just the two of us with our computer screens, right? And we wanted to have these kind of conversations, and we dreamed of having these kind of conversations with so many different people around the country. And now every time we're on a Zoom and it gets to happen, it just feels like a small miracle to us. So it's great. So we're so happy to be here. For the title, I'm so glad you said that you got so many layers out of it, because that's what we were trying to do with the title. And it's one of those rare occasions where the title was the same title all the way through. A lot of times with books, you have a different title at the beginning, or like a working title or a title in progress, and then everybody weighs in on it as it goes along. But we had this title from the beginning, and, you know, we really feel like it works because we're all so polarized, which is part of what the book is about. And, you know, one of the themes, everybody is, oh my God, I'm this person and you're that person. I believe in this and you believe in that. And my group is this and your group is that. And so it kind of captures that, right? This feeling of we, whoever the we are not like them, whoever the them are. That's constantly interchangeable. And also, you know, Riley and Jen have, for all its complexities, and I know we're going to get into that, a special relationship and a special bond, you know, given when and how they met and how they've, you know, kind of been sisters all these years. And so some of the title alludes to this idea that they feel special, right? Like to some degree, like their friendship, they feel like we are not like that. Like we are not breakable in a way. And that is the central question of the book. Is their bond breakable when it's tested?
Awesome. I love that. Breakable. I mean, I almost want to dive in, and we jump around a lot. So we're a crazy
all
group,
for it.
But you
Yeah,
know,
we love a jump.
Okay. It's funny because you know, I had a couple people write me and say, you know, they understood the overt we are not like them. You know, Cookie, for example, talking about, well, you know, those people are gonna riot. Okay, big we are not like them, that we all encounter and have to either, like, you know, the microaggressions of race. And even Gigi, sweet Gigi, we loved her too, but she gave Jen a pass because she's not like those other white people. And I had a bunch of people, I come from an African descent, who wrote me and said, you know what? Reading this book also made me understand this narrative of, even amongst Black people, we are not like them. And I was like, these women are genius.
It's real. Yeah. And I think, you know, we wanted people's allegiances to change throughout reading the book, like that you identify with different people that you wouldn't have thought you would identify with. So if you start with this level of tribalism of even thinking what group you're a part of, like I believe in this, and then you see a different perspective in the book and you say, oh, okay, well, I could kind of see it that way. Hopefully it breaks down some of those really rigid identifications.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Couple more questions and then I'm going to open it up to you, but there's some things I couldn't get by. I want to start with some of the characters here. And we're going to dive into Jen and Riley because we obviously hated them a lot throughout this because they were just so nuanced. And so, I mean, my base question is, can you talk a little bit about two women, one of you is Black, one of you is writing in the voices of a Black woman and a white woman, and how that worked? Like, Christine, were you Riley? Joe, were you, you know, and how you sort of navigated that relationship?
Yeah, you know, we get asked that question so much. And it's funny how many people assume that I did write Jen and Christine did write Riley. In fact, we were interviewed by one radio host, the dude radio host, who was like, oh, okay, so you're Jen and you're Riley. And we're like, oh, that's That's not how fiction.
And they just kept calling us Jen and Riley the rest of the interview.
The rest of the interview. And you know, the book was such a co-written production from the very beginning that each of us really like had a hand in each sentence of this book because we had such a robust outline from the beginning. So it was really like who felt the scene more than who felt what character more, or really who had time for what scene more, because Christine was still working her full-time job and I was making a zillion podcasts and birthing 2 children the whole time we were writing this book. So it was like, oh, okay, yeah, like I really feel their like scene in the bar or this scene of Riley at the news station because I've been a journalist for 20 years, right? And also so much of the 2 women is informed by their race, but also a lot of it is informed by them being women living in the world. And, you know, there was a lot that each of us could contribute to both of those characters. And in fact, I think when it came to some of the racial nuances, it was almost easier for us to talk that through than for us to personally put it on the page. So, you know, with some of the things that happened to Riley, a lot of the microaggressions and stuff, I would almost put on my reporter hat and talk through it with Christine because it is so personal and you're mining a lot of your personal traumas there on the page. Or I hear things in all white spaces that Christine doesn't hear necessarily. And so she'd ask me questions like, you know, what kinds of things did you hear? You know, when you've been around different white people and they've seen some of these things in the news. And we wanted to get all of that on the page in a really raw and authentic way so that, as you said, readers can see this and be like, oh yeah. Oh, I know someone who said that, or I've said that, maybe not in front of
hello, Lou.
friends or in front of my
Yeah,
class
exactly.
friends, right?
Hello.
Yeah. Hello, Lou. I
Piece
will
of
tell you
work.
about Lou.
We kind of loved Lou. She was well written.
Guys, I can't help it. I love a little bit of Lou. All of her off-color jokes are things that I actually heard from taxi drivers in Philadelphia. For a year, I just carried a little notebook and I was like, oh, you Lou, there you are.
Yeah, we really liked Lou. So as we dive into like creating Riley and Jen, and you guys, you can use your emoji buttons, but I wish we had a better, I should do polls for this, but I'm curious because we went back and forth on like who we loved more. And there were different traits about different people. You know, on some days we'd be like, Jen is just great. She's just that loyal girl, you know, she's just loyal to everyone, but she's blind about everything else. But we give her a pass because, you know, she'll fight for you. And then Riley, we wrestled with because Riley just felt like she was constantly destroying herself or self-sabotaging herself. So talk about like writing that from a racial perspective.
Yeah. Well, we really, you know, especially with co-writing, as Joe talked about, we had to figure out a lot before we wrote. And even no matter what, you really want to figure out who your characters are. So we had to spend a lot of time before we even put, you know, a word on the computer screen and figuring out who these women were. I mean, partly how their friendship came to be, like why were they friends, and so what was going to challenge them, but also who they were as individuals and what motivated them and all of those things. And you know, for Riley in particular, she's just a really compartmentalized person. Like that has just been her kind of coping mechanism and her way in the world, like just to keep her eyes on the prize, like focus on what's ahead of her and not let anything get in the way of that, particularly anything difficult or that's going to involve too many emotions. Like that is not her thing. And that applies to all aspects of her life, her relationships and work and race, right? Like it was a lot easier for her to think, you know, just to put her head in the sand in a lot of ways and just to keep going.
Always.
I think we can all, you know, identify with that in some ways. And then when she's tested, and part of her growth in this book is she going to be able to realize that this approach to life is limiting. It's limiting her relationships. It's limiting her mental health. You know, it's just, she had a lot to work through. And I think in a lot of ways, our friendships are how we work through some of our shit. I think we're allowed to curse on this Zoom. Usually it's Joe, not me, but you know, I allowed, you know, to work through everything, to be tested and to learn about ourselves. And this book and what happened, because it was race and because it involved Jen and, you know, a lot of, and her job, it brought everything together for her to have to question a lot and to confront a lot. And, you know, Jen is that loyal friend, but Jen is that friend that you get really frustrated with, you know. I mean, we were shaking our fist at Jen too. And I mean, that's the beauty of, we hope, the book, but also female friendships, and that we all analyze other people's relationships, romantic or otherwise, and say, why are these people still together? Like, what are they doing? Why do they like each other? What's making this work? Like, I don't get it. Is, you know, I mean, we've all thought that about a lot of our friends' relationships. And so we wanted to dig into that and bring that alive on the page, right? So that people could have different opinions, like, why are these women friends? Or I totally get it, I have a complicated friendship like that, or, you know, or changes throughout the book. But we hope that people are rooting for them, rooting for this friendship, because we can see how much they love each other despite all the complications that they have, and that if there's a way that they can bring their truer selves to their relationship, that's going to unlock something for them. And isn't that what we all could benefit from, right? Like figuring out how to bring our true selves to our relationships, whatever that looks like for us, to become closer to another person.
Yeah, we love that. We love that. Okay, so you guys, please feel free. If you've got questions, raise your hand. I think the raise your hand button is there, but like I have a bunch from our chats and stuff, or you can drop them in the chat. All right, Amy, I'm gonna get you. I think you can unmute yourself, or I can unmute you, but please go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, hi.
Hi,
Billy
Amy.
is here. Thank you guys so much for writing this book, and I cannot tell you how much it resonates with me as someone who was born and raised on the main line, which actually brings me to my question. Do you feel like the story is able to be told in the way that you've told it, if you remove some of the socioeconomic differences that the two characters had? Like, do you feel like you're still able to have that in-depth conversation? Is the scenario, you know, how much do you feel like it changes when you eliminate that element of it between the two friends?
Wait, Amy, I want to just make sure you ask, like, specifically, you know, was it the fact that Jen, for example, was from sort of like a disparate background with Lou?
Yeah, so like, very good point. So to your point, as someone who grew up on the main line and being in that socioeconomic status, I can totally see those conversations happening. But when reading the book, I'm saying to myself, yeah, she had different opportunities to go to school because, you know, the thought was, hey, there are more scholarships available to women of color. You know, are you still saying that when we're both going to Brown, you know, or an Ivy League school?
Oh, that's
like,
a really
what
good
does that look
question.
like?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you're necessarily saying that. I think the conversations are different, right? And getting the socioeconomic stuff in there was also really important to us for a lot of reasons. And one, Christina and I are both big readers. Christina's published 1 billion books, and we really wanted to see different socioeconomic groups on the page. You know, for so long, like so much women's commercial fiction is just like rich ladies in New York.
Yes.
Rich ladies go to the beach. And we kind of just
Rich ladies get a summer house.
Rich ladies go to their cabin. But you know, I grew up very like working to middle class in Philadelphia. And I felt like we didn't see enough families like mine necessarily in commercial women's fiction. So that's one part of it. But what I do, and we also wanted to show how money comes between friends and how tricky that can be. But I think they would have had similar conversations and similar struggles if they came from a wealthy background, just they'd be different. Like it would just like, it would focus less on, you know, the money aspects and like, all right, so both girls are going to Brown, but it's like, oh, did she like get invited to that sorority or that party? Or like, I think they would still, and I think they would still grapple with race. I think that the issues that come up that make people so uncomfortable talking about race transcend socioeconomics. And I know I see that a lot in Philly now. Like my kid goes to a like fancy like preschool, Montessori preschool in Center City, and Christina and I did their book club. And people are so uncomfortable talking about race. It doesn't matter how much money you have or how little money you have. And that's one of the things that we're hoping that the book kind of transcends.
Yeah. And we also wanted to, I mean, the same way most commercial fiction, features or is weighted towards, wealthy white women, just in general, we wanted to show different type, like the flip side of that is a lot of commercial fiction or a lot of fiction or pulp culture is rooted in like one type of Black story too, right? Like a lot of pathology, a lot of poverty, a lot of, violence, a lot of stereotypes, et cetera, a lot of white savior narratives where, in 9 books out of 10, it would have been Jen's family that was, taking in Riley and helping her, to her brighter future kind of thing. And so we really wanted to be intentional about flipping that on its head and showing different types of characters all the way around. And there's still way too few commercial fiction or pop culture, even television movies. I mean, we're making strides, but that feature middle class Black people doing regular things basically. And that's what we wanted to have in terms of Riley and her family.
No, I think you guys did a great job. Amy, great question. Anybody else? Who's next? Anybody? Okay, we're quiet. Marcos, you just unmute. Okay, fine. Well, if no one has a question, I'm going to keep going. Okay, so on this Riley and Jen thing, while you guys are being shy. Oh, Marcos, do you have a question?
Hi, guys.
There you go.
So I just had, I finished up the book right before, we started the Zoom, and I was kind of curious as to at the end where, Kevin is hand-given a job where Sean actually, loses his job.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just almost like the icing on the cake as the book was finishing, and these women were coming to some kind of understanding, and yet the scales are still so unbalanced there. Can you talk about your timing of that and why you threw Sean's story in there so late? I was kind of waiting, like, what was Sean's story? Why was he always it was almost like we were waiting to find out the whole book would happen to him. So the timing of that and how you kind of related it to the end of the book, like, what was that? What were you thinking there?
Great question.
Oh, you're on mute, Jen.
We did a quick conference call earlier today. And the person was like, how many times do you think you've said you're on mute in the past year?
Drink every time you're on mute.
I think that I really want to get a t-shirt to wear whenever I'm on a Zoom that says you're on mute. So,
we made a t-shirt for your book. We'll tell you about it after.
Oh my God, I can't.
Your head off.
So one thing, and I'll let Christine add to this, is we wanted you to kind of wonder about Sean's situation through the book for a while, so that to figure out like what preconceived ideas did you have about Sean, right? And we wanted to do that with a lot of the different characters and a lot of the like littler reveals too, like with Corey, who I'm forever going to call Alex, by the way, because he was originally called Alex and we changed the name at the end. And I'm like, sometimes someone will ask a question about Corey and I'm like, who's that again? From Boy Meets World. But because so with Corey, not Alex, we kind of reveal that he's white, like a little bit later on, right? And so that you have this moment where you're like, oh, but I assumed he was Black. And then you kind of have to stop yourself and pull back, like, but why did I assume that? Or, what did you assume Sean did or didn't do? Or did you assume that Corey did break up with Riley? And why did you do that? So we want people to unpack those assumptions once the reveal comes later on.
And, you know, I think it's interesting you say that about timing at the end of the book, because one thing we really struggled with this story, and I'd love to hear thoughts on this, is that we didn't want to make it too tidy in a bow where, you know, everybody learns about racism and is a changed person and lives, you know, there's justice is served and we all live happily ever after. You know, that's not realistic, right? I mean, even personal human growth, the span of this book is a few months, right? People aren't changing who they are in a span of a few months, or changing, you know, the relationship from the ground up in the span of a few months, nor are we solving the problem of police violence in America on the pages, right, in a kumbaya way. And so we wanted to show that sometimes your friendship, if it's going to endure and you're going to talk about these things, it's going to endure in spite of the fact that society is always going to lag behind, right? We can't wait for society to be fine and then like, okay, well, now we don't have these conflicts and everybody's on equal footing so we can be friends. You know, that's not really going to work. And so Riley and Jen having these tentative steps to figuring out, you know, how they're going to talk about these things and be more open still exist in a world where people like Kevin have more opportunities than people like Sean. Like that is just the reality of things, and how they come to navigate that is part of the story, right? I mean, we would have loved to have created a different ending in the same way we'd love to change real life, right? But we wanted the ending to be as realistic as possible.
2 quick questions, and we'll go to LRGA that came from the comments. The nuance of having Sean from a very young age be into white women. Can you just speak on that?
Yeah. You know, I mean, that's something that, you know, as a Black woman, it's a topic that lots of Black women talk about constantly, you know, and I think this is what Riley talks about in the book, but hopefully it mirrors a lot of those conversations, which is, you know, for so often and so long, white women are this ideal, right? And it's only recently, I mean, recently in my lifetime that we see Black women on TV and on magazine covers and, you know, having any sort of toehold even in like what is beautiful or what is attainable or, you know, what is glamorous, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, it's a real challenge, right?
Like,
yeah,
I don't know if anyone remembers the Spice Girls, but like Mel B was the first Black girl I saw with big, actually curly hair on TV. I was like, oh my God, yeah, like this is our life. So
well, we can remember that this wasn't always the case, and that makes such an impact. I mean, I remember being in elementary school and being like, people like me aren't on TV, or people like me aren't in magazines and things like that. And that takes a toll. Now, thank God it's different, but I mean, still ways to go, but it's different. And so Riley, being of that generation, was conditioned to be like, you know, our Black women enough, and for her own brother to constantly have another preference, it's something that, you know, she has to unpack and deal with, and especially double down on it when it's that she then falls in love with a white man, right? Like the level of hypocrisy there she has to work with.
Absolutely.
We have a special guest star.
I know, I love it. This is what I love about book club. This is like working moms, boss moms all day long. So I love it. LRGA Cares. Hi.
Hi, everybody. Hello, wonderful authors. I was calling y'all co-authors. I don't know if that's...
Yeah, that's great. We love it.
Okay, great. So, okay, I had this feeling, just as a Black woman growing up in America, that there were paid incentives to police for killing Black people. Insert $10,000 check. So, Joe, did you hear about that in the back of the taxi? Or is that like a made up fiction thing? Because I swear, as a Black person, I'm like, they must be getting incentives for this. So for an incentive to physically be paid and cashed in the book, I'm wondering where that whole concept came from. I love the book.
Oh, thank you.
I did not hear that in the back of a taxi. I think that one, I'm actually trying to go back. I think I still have my notebook from the back of the taxi to think about like the things that we heard there. I'm trying to remember where that one came from. I mean, we spent so much time interviewing cops and DAs and, different people that work in the criminal justice system here in Philadelphia about the things that they've seen and they've heard. And that was it was such an important part for us, for it to be authentic, and also for the book to not feel that we were painting a morality tale, that everything was a gray area, and that, you're seeing this from so many different sides. And I have a lot of friends that are cops here in Philly, and they pointed out things that we also got wrong, but when we made them up in our heads, right? Because we're like, well, this is the way we think it is. And we weren't necessarily right. Because I think the media has done a really poor job of showing how these situations often go down, but then also showing, the human side of the families behind this, which is also it's the reason we started the book with Justin and ended with his mom. So yeah, I don't remember. Christine, do you remember where?
Yeah, well, I think we were trying to get to this idea, which we saw. I mean, we wrote this way before 𝐁 Rittenhouse, but it really hit close to home that white supremacist groups or these factions or whatever will rally around a cause. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like, even if it's a stranger, it's like you're instantly in the brotherhood, right? Whether you want to be or not. And so, I mean, when you look at 𝐁 Rittenhouse's defense fund, I mean, we're talking millions of dollars pouring in from strangers who just use money to show their allegiance to an idea, right? Like the same way people, are just whatever cause it is, like anti-CRT or like whatever it is. And so that was what we were trying to get at, because it wasn't so much the police or the police departments endorsing this, but that strangers, will rally around people as a cause, and, Kevin became a cause in a way, whether he wanted to or not.
And that was also part of the we are not like them, right? Like, what tribe do you flock to? And like, what does it mean for that, like that tribalism, and why is it forming, especially in this day and age? And for me, as a journalist for so long, how is the media contributing to that kind of tribalism and this us versus them narrative?
Yeah, and also we were really trying to show how you show support, right? Like we have Briley at the Black church, right? Like we're going to rally together. We're going to figure this out. We're going to have a march. We're going to do these things to support our community. On the other side, there are also things, like the money and the Facebook and the support and the, the police unions. Everybody has, when it comes to something as polarizing as this, everybody has people, groups in the background then showing a way to take sides.
Yeah.
Really interesting. Thank you, ladies.
Okay, a couple
Great
rapid
question.
fire
Thank you.
questions on that. So does Riley cash the check?
I think Riley does, because she doesn't know. She doesn't know.
She doesn't know. Yeah.
Jen gets this from. I think we had so many questions about the check cashing, which I think is so interesting. Should Jen have done it? All fair questions, but I wonder if Riley had. If Riley knew where the check came from, would she cash it or not? Like, would that factor in, or what would she do with it? I think it might be less about personal gain, but more about her maybe giving it away. I don't know. It would be a tough dilemma. I don't know what I would do in that situation.
I don't either. We went back and forth. Well,
Yeah.
we were kind of in agreement. Don't let the blood money go to waste, but like fight.
Yes, but then what do you do?
That's what I've always said. I'm like, well, don't let those guys' money go to waste.
Yeah,
Whatever.
do something.
Okay.
You know what somebody asked? I have a question for the group. Joe, I forgot to tell you this. This was in a book club that I was on the other day. And this is a question and a contemplation that we hadn't had before, which is, after the scope of the book, if Tamara ended up finding out that Riley was friends with Jen, because we don't know that she does, right, in the book, is that forgivable? What would Tamara's reaction be to learning this information? And I thought that was so fast. I was like, I wrote this book and I'm like, I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, my friend.
We wrestled with Riley a lot of times because we couldn't tell whether or not she was genuine. I mean, you know, you kind of likened her to Sabrina. We were like, she lied to her boss. She was double timing a lot of people to get ahead, including like her best friends, this. So like we really wrestled with Riley sometimes and the things she had to do to get to where she had to be. And that one was a big one.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how I'd feel if I was Tamara learning this, because on one hand, she didn't necessarily do anything to compromise the story. It wasn't like, I think it'd be different if she did do an hour-long piece with Kevin and then Tamara can look back and say, oh, you were clearly influenced. But, you know, she still covered the story to the best of her ability. You know, she wasn't using her friendship or trading on it. So I don't know. It's very interesting.
It was a fine line. We have to talk about Corey and we also have to talk about Kevin. I don't know where to go first, you guys. But let's start with Kevin because we're kind of in the heavy part. I see some nods with that. So we wrestled with whether or not Kevin, if his remorse, like Kevin as a character, we can't tell if he was just like dumb,
a little
like surface. And, you know, we thought, yeah, we really wrestled with whether his remorse was genuine or he just was remorseful for the fact that his life, pardon my French, got effed up.
Yeah. We do not have a definitive answer for that.
And you know, I think they've evolved over time too. I have a lot of thoughts on Kevin. One, we purposely don't know. We're purposely not in Kevin's head, right? We're in Jen and Riley's heads. And fun fact for this, the book was originally written in third person and we changed it to first person after the entire thing had been written. I called Christine and I was like, are you sitting down? I want to make a
This is I know we need some context that this is 2 weeks before our deadline to our publisher.
Yeah, what?
I get this call.
And I'm like, I was like, I think something's missing. Like we just have to, like, there's an intimacy missing. And she was like, I can't believe you're doing this to me.
How do you even do that? Everyone in the chat is like, what? Is that even possible? You just rewrote the book?
Yeah. Yeah, we did. But it's so much better, right? Because and Christine like came around because I rewrote the first chapter and she's like, you're right, we'll do this. Because you're in their heads. But because of that, we're never in Kevin's head. So the only way we see Kevin is through their eyes. And the lens we see him through Jen's eyes is very different than the way we see him through Riley's eyes. But I think Kevin is like, you know, I think Marcus said it in the chat. I think he's lost. I think he genuinely is remorseful. In the same way, you know, I've talked to officers before, not after a shooting like this one, but after different kinds of incidents, never a murder. But there's a lot of genuine remorse there and self-hatred. We talked to one therapist who counseled cops after a police shooting. And I think that he's very buttoned up and hard to get to, like a lot of cops. They're very, we talked to a lot of police wives too. A lot of police officers don't share with their wives what they see, what they do. The police force is such an old boys club and so impenetrable in that way. And hopefully we're going to start seeing it change. A lot of my friends that are cops are actually female cops. And you know, so that's an interesting perspective. A lot of the police officers that we interviewed for the book were female police officers. But
really?
Yeah, I mean, on the scale of like, is Kevin a genius? No, I think he's kind of a dopey guy. But I think in my head, he wanted to be of service. He's not one of the bad apples. He wanted to be a good cop. And so I think his remorse is genuine. And that's the way it was very important to us that it was not so clear cut, like, I'm an asshole, racist cop going out on the streets, like, fuck these people, that there is genuine nuance within the police force. You have his brother who is that asshole, who is that bad apple, right?
Oh yeah.
And I think that Kevin is kind of the other side of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
And
talked
also,
about
no,
that.
I think we're always to what we talked about earlier, judging people's relationship. I think is one thing that's interesting. It's so funny how you create the characters, but they're also separate from you. And I think, I do a lot of judging of Jen and Kevin's relationship. Like it really did seem like, and I think a lot of us know this woman who was really, gung-ho on having a certain kind of life and wanting certain things. And then a guy comes by that fits that mold more than anything else, right? So it's like, I'm this age and it's this time in my life, and this is the type of person I could be with, because he fits, he's like responsible and, this and that. And so it's like, it's him. And relationships have been built on less, I guess, but that's what we were trying to get to, that, Jen is more focused on the vision that she wants of stability in a family than she is on like who that, Kevin's specific personality traits maybe.
I liked it. Was one of the things that made Jen sort of likable. Like this idea of loyalty came up. You saw loyalty to the blue, loyalty to your family, and like that pressure of like there's 30 cops sitting outside the room. So I think even in the chat, people are saying the fact that the fact that Kevin agreed to go against the brotherhood, and he had this thing of Jen being like, look, you're gonna pick me and this baby, because that's the answer. There's nothing else. And I'm not doing this, that was a big thing. So it, and we wrestled with whether that was enough, but hearing you guys sort of talk about it, it was a big deal. Yeah.
Well, and also one of the themes that we hope people talk about in the book that gave us a lot to think about and talk about is, what is forgiveness and what does make things right? Like what was going to make Kevin and Jen's marriage better or allow her to forgive him for what he did? And what's going to make Riley and Jen's relationship better? And what's going to make it, Tamara might stand to get millions of dollars from the city, right? As we see oftentimes in these civil suits, that's not going to make her feel better. Like, right. So what, a letter from Kevin isn't going to make her feel better. Does it make Kevin feel better? There's all these questions of what is forgiveness and how do you repair and what is justice? Should Jen even have bothered to approach Tamara in the bathroom? But like you're, a real asshole if you just walk out of the bathroom without saying anything. But like, what else could you say? So you're kind of torn in all these situations. And what we wanted readers to do, and which Joe and I did a lot, is keep asking ourselves, well, what would you do? What would you do? What would you do? And as authors, we wanted to set up scenarios where people could think that, not tell people what they would do. Like we didn't want our characters to be like, well, this is what you should do, and this is the right thing to do, because it's so much more complicated than that. We don't even know, so it's a vehicle for you to examine what you would do and why.
Yeah, the meeting in the bathroom was intense, and the letter was intense. I think a lot of us were unsure whether or not he should have written the letter, whether or not, and there was probably the saving grace for the letter was the piece where he actually said, I held his hand, because we figured as a mother, like
you want to know that. Yeah.
Really like, how dare Kevin? But then I think it kind of softened us a little bit when it was like, well, we want to know those last minutes.
But also I think that you could send, heaven knows it's tragic that there's been too many, women like Tamara on the other side. And I think there could be a range that some people would really appreciate getting a letter like that, and some people would be enraged, and you wouldn't know. Like it's impossible to anticipate what that reaction would be, right? So Kevin doing it is one thing, but Tamara could be receptive and she could fly off the handle, and both of those would be valid reactions, right? We just wouldn't know. I think the question is like, how would we react? And that's one thing to ask yourself, because then it's really questions your ideas about forgiveness and how you feel about the situation.
All right, you guys, I'm opening up the floor. Who's got a question? Unmic yourself. Anyone?
It takes a minute for the unmute. All of the chat is just lit over here.
Like
I'm trying to talk and read and talk and read.
Oh, okay. Let's talk about that. Thanks, Shar. What was the intention behind Gigi sharing the story about her cousin Jimmy so late in life on her deathbed? This is something that Riley had never heard about, especially when she saw Sean dating a white woman. Was this shared intentionally to be sort of a tipping point? for Riley to take a stand or choice on which side she was on, or to stand for Black Lives Matter or for her friend? Great question, Shar.
Yeah, great question. I personally don't think it was Gigi doing it on purpose in the context of this particular shooting, because we have to realize there's, even in the fictional world as the real world, there would have been a lot of these incidences before that. I really do think it was more of a end of life kind of confession, right? Like it brought up a lot of feelings that she wanted to talk about this. And, you know, there is so much shame, and there is so much stigma, and there is so much, we don't want to revisit trauma in the Black community in particular, but other communities where you do have generational trauma. And so this idea of you want to keep history alive and really, you know, talk about what happened in the past, but at the same time, you also want to leave the past in the past. Like it's so difficult to talk about. And I mean, imagine Gigi after all of this time, you know, when is a good time to sit down and say, hey, remember this horrible, horrible, violent, terrible thing that happened, like, you know, at dinner on Sunday night, right? Like it's easier to stuff it down. And I think there's a parallel there with Riley, right? What's easy to stuff down, what's easy to
Riley
swallow.
is a stuffer downer.
Exactly. What's easy to deny until you really can't deny it anymore. And I think that was what Gigi was really getting at, that this had been such a central relationship in her life, and then such a trauma for her. And as you know, my parents are in their 80s, and you do start looking back on your life and thinking about things in a different way, right? And I think Gigi was at that point where she was thinking about these connections. And what we really wanted to show in the book, you guys, is and by bringing Jimmy in, it does that, is like, this is a history, right? Like, you know, we wanted to show that racism and these kinds of traumas and events are not things that happen to people's like great way back, right? And you're not affected anymore. Like Gigi is still alive and knew somebody who was lynched, and Riley is still alive. You know, I mean, this is a real living, breathing trauma that has lots of obvious and subtle ramifications and consequences, including Gigi talking about, you know, her fear of Sean dating white women. Like that's a real fear. She didn't articulate where that fear came from, and yet she still wanted to protect him in the best way that she knew how, which is warning her off of them. So we wanted to make all of those connections.
That's great. Iris, welcome to the stage. I think you can unmute yourself, or I can unmute you.
Hi, Iris.
Hello, everyone. Just wanted to echo everybody's sentiments that I just loved the book. It was definitely a really good read. One thing stood out to me, only because where I'm from, you guys basically had Kevin and Jen move to Jacksonville, Florida. That's where I'm from. So I was like, oh, wow. So I just kind of wanted to know, I mean, I kind of get why they would move to Florida. Unfortunately, I feel like it can be a safe haven for certain situations, but just wanted to get your, you know, your actual thoughts on why you picked Jacksonville specifically. And then there was a point where you said something about Burger King being the birthplace, Jacksonville being the birthplace of Burger King. I did not know that. So that was interesting too.
Yeah, I think we wanted it to be somewhere that would just kind of have them totally out of their element, right? Like Philadelphia was such a part of Kevin's identity. And if you're from Philly, like I am, even though I've lived all over the country, it's like, it really is a part of your identity, unlike a lot of cities. And Jacksonville just felt like Florida in general was like just completely out of their wheelhouse, right? Like he would have to rebuild a whole new life. But then also Jacksonville felt like if you were to say Florida and tell someone, oh, we're going to like Miami, someone's like, oh, I know that. And then Jacksonville, they're like, oh, I don't know anyone from there, right? Like, so it felt like a place where like he would really be a stranger in a strange land. And also just, I mean, climate-wise, totally different. Like everything would be totally different. And I also went to, honestly, it's so funny how things pop up in books. And when people ask questions, you're like, wow, when the Eagles played the Patriots in the Super Bowl, it was in Jacksonville. And I was there covering the Super Bowl for the New York Daily News. And I remember quite enjoying it as a city, and I've never written it into anything. And so Jacksonville it was.
Mhm. And I remember, I don't even know. I mean, I remember writing the Burger King thing. It was like such a weird Wikipedia fact, but we were trying to simulate what Jen would do when she learned that she's moving to this far off place, right? Like you would Google it. You would say like, oh my gosh, like I've never even heard of Jacksonville, which Jen would not imagine living there and had no reason to research Jacksonville. And so if you Google Jacksonville, that comes up. And so that would be something like, oh, okay, you know, here's something that I learned about the new city that I'm going to live in.
Great question. I think a lot of people are like, was it because it's a red state? You know, so they're diving in to wonder, but that makes sense. Like sometimes it's as simple as that. Remy, and then Osiris. I think you raised your hand.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Remy.
First, and I'm going to echo everybody's sentiment and thank you so much for writing this book. Being a Black woman, but not being raised in America, I mean, you experience a lot of the racism, but it doesn't hit you like it hits a Black person that is raised in America. And I think what this book did for me was explain some of the nuances as to why it hits so hard and why, okay, this thing happened, it was messed up, let's get over it and move on. You know, I see where there's a lot of trauma that's resonating with every instance that occurs, where somebody who probably, like myself, who doesn't have it in their DNA, it's easy for you to just step over and move forward. But this makes me a better ally. And this helps me understand that, you know, the plight, you know, a little bit better. So thank you so much for writing this book. It's made me a better person.
Oh
and
my
more.
God, I love that. That's really meaningful. Yeah. And I do appreciate that. I do think that even you had mentioned earlier, Tanya, the difference between, you know, even Black people in America or white people in America, like even in the subgroups that we try to paint in broad strokes, there are differences. And I do think that, you know, in the Black community, when you have immigrants from outside, you know, growing up in America, in the Black community, there is like such a different perspective that you would experience racism, but it's hard to, in a way, you're approaching it almost like a white person in America in terms of like understanding the nuances and why would you feel this way. And there's so, you know, I wrote a whole Cup of Joe column about, you know, mentioning this, where I like a Senegalese friend, you know, was saying what I felt like could come out of the mouth of a white person. Like, why don't you just pull yourself up by the bootstraps? And like, I came here from Senegal and I'm this. And like, Black people in America are so lazy. I mean, all the tropes. And I was like, but you have to forgive somebody for not understanding the, you know, that there's a lot of layers and complexity. So thank you. I mean, that's such a great comment. And it's really nice that you could have a perspective like that.
Thank you, Remy. Osiris. And then I'm going to maybe not say your name, 𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿, but you're next and you'll tell us how to say your name properly.
Well, first of all, Joe and Christine, I just want to thank you for writing this type of book and really for all of the nuances and the respect to history. In the past couple of months and in this past couple of years, I've been doing a lot of work in terms of social justice and even just bringing forward some of these things, even at work and everything else. And what struck me a lot was just being able to have this level of a narrative, but having so many different aspects that we deal with as BIPOC people of color, and then also just the nuance, that juxtaposition that we have there with having this best friend that's Black and that's white. And even beginning the book, I had to kind of go back and read that prologue. I don't know if anybody else did that, but like initially I was like, what's happening here? But then went back and just read how you narrated someone who was dying and some of the things that they were thinking. And so it was just so rich, kind of just making it through and making those connections. And I thought recently, as this would be the type of book that you could bring out in a session, as opposed to, and I love all of those other books.
I hear you, yeah.
Sometimes it's not easy to bring forth some of these concepts when you're talking about how to be an anti-racist and you're just kind of having all of that. But this book had all of the concepts in there that would be able to kind of just forward the conversation in groups. And I thought, you know, I might bring this one forward as I lead a group that allows
Oh,
us
please
to
do.
dive in.
Yeah. No, Joe and I are.
Commend you on
Oh,
just the
thank
concepts, the level of concepts and the respect to history.
Well, I want to commend you on your bookshelves in the background. Those are amazing. I'm so into this. But really, I mean, thank you for saying that. Joe and I have been doing a lot of corporate D&I events with that same philosophy, because you were really intentional about making this a novel, because as much great nonfiction as there is out there, which there is, there's just a different kind of entry point and a different kind of relation that we have to fiction, and it being not necessarily even more palatable, but more relatable and a better way to empathize with the characters, and not as you have to do your homework and learn things. We're kind of tricking people into learning things or thinking about things another way, and giving people, I think, an easier way into sharing their personal stories. And if the lesson that Jen and Riley had in this book is they really need to share more and talk more and be open, then we feel like that applies to colleagues and friends too, right? Like in your workplace, it is helpful if you can bring your authentic self to the table, talk about your experiences, not feel like you have to be two different people, especially as a person of color or Black woman at work, right? And so that's really valuable. And to the degree that the book can be a tool to show that, as opposed to tell it like, you're doing this wrong. We love that. So yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna go to Jeffany. Jeffany, please tell me your name. I'm embarrassed.
It's Jennifer.
Oh,
Hi.
I wasn't even close. That's beautiful. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Well, as someone who's from a different culture, it was kind of hard for me to look into race, because where I'm from, people judge you more about your economic status instead of your color. So people would look down on you if you don't have a great education or if you don't have a lot of money, while your color is not really that important. So I gave Jen a lot of pass until she cashed the check. I want to go back. So when Kevin said, "Oh, you're so different than her," do you think she was talking about race, or maybe about the character where Jen is like a free person, where she feels so free, she'll do anything, she'll say anything, while Riley will double think before she acts and say, okay, and see, okay, what are people gonna think about me before she does something?
I think we really wanted the reader to consider that.
Yeah.
Right? Because again, we all come to the table with our own biases, and it's interesting to think about what you think he means first. I think that Kevin really sees Riley, and again, and maybe Christine thinks something differently. I don't know if we've talked about this before, but I think he sees Riley as kind of uptight, and that she thinks she's too good for him. And he feels that way because he feels like she's probably too good for him. You know, he's not used to being around people who work in professional fields like that, who have gone to a fancy college. He has not spent much time with her. He's jealous of how much her and Jen's relationship. And so I don't think that he means anything racial necessarily, or I don't think he thinks he means anything racial.
But I'm going to add to that. I mean, it's interesting because I'm going to add to that all of the, or many of the Black women or Black people on this Zoom will appreciate that there is a subtlety about people feeling resentful that you're better than them, or they feel their perception that you're better than them or aspire to be better than them because of your race, right? Like if Riley was a white woman, I don't think that Kevin would necessarily have the same, like, who does she think she is? There is definitely a who does she think she is kind of angle when you add race to the mix, right? Because it might even be subconscious on Kevin's part that he's having this reaction. But I do think that you know, sometimes it's ingrained, and it can be more ingrained in other people, and some people rather than others, that there is a natural order to things, you know, like it is what our pulp culture, all of our cues tell us, like this is the natural order. And when something even subtly bucks against that natural order, like she's successful and I'm not, she is more powerful than I am, she has more money than I am, like that upsets something deep and fundamental in people, even if they're not aware of it.
Great answer. Okay, San Irving, hi. Now all the questions are coming in, you guys. We've got to let these ladies out of here by like 9:30 at the done, but keep going. San Irving.
Okay, I had that question. I was going to ask, did Kevin really like Riley? That was what you guys just answered it. And then the second question that I had was, were you emotional writing this book? Because I know when we were checking in weekly with Tanya, I was crying.
Yeah.
We all cried. I cried on Instagram.
I cried a lot because I have a son that's action with the cop, you know, and so this book, I mean, I was all over the place reading it.
Well, I mean, we don't like to say we love that you cried, but we love that you cried. I mean, we're not in the business of like trying to make people cry in our lives, except that we did want to write a book that had people feeling all the feels and having an emotional response, right? And so that really is meaningful to us to hear that, you know, you had a reaction to it. I think we had, I mean, I'll let Joe speak to this too, because we probably had different reactions, but I think part of like just writing a book is so hard. So I think a lot of the emotions of writing this book were, can I do this? Is this good? You know, not even like the story itself, but just the feat of it, which I will admit I struggled with. And this is my first time doing it. Joe is much more used to this journey. But I underestimated like something that I think about and talk about as a Black woman all the time is race. Like, I mean, since I could talk, form words, you know, the family dinner table with my parents. And I was surprised, and I think sometimes frustrated at how it's harder to write about race than it is to talk about race, right? It's harder to make it feel like not sharing my experiences as a Black woman. And some of the things like Riley at the work event where somebody gives her his coat at the party, his Freeness fundraiser, drawn from my real life, you know, things like that. But they're also cliche, but they're cliche because they happen all the time. And so you go into a spin cycle of like, well, these are real, but then they're cliche, you know? So that was like a lot of emotion for me, you know, to like the, you know, sometimes the frustration of it.
Well, were we the only book club that were this emotional? Because I'm pretty sure anybody else that read it probably cried as well. Because that's what I cried.
Yes, there's for better or worse a lot of tears around this book. I don't know if that's something we should be bragging about or apologizing for.
Well,
I don't know, but it is meaningful that you can have a reaction to fictional people. And I'm not a psychologist by any means, but I think when you have a reaction to something, it opens you up to be able to be vulnerable, right? And which is probably why I would hope that your discussions over the last, you know, few weeks have been so good, because when you're more open and you feel, you know, just like more vulnerable and raw to share, I think those are some of the best conversations.
Rihanna. And then Chelsea, Rashida. I hope somebody asked about Corey. If not,
oh my God, it's Corey. I'm stepping away just to grab wine. I'm sure you guys will understand.
Oh, we totally do. Go ahead, Brianna.
Okay, so I feel like you guys might have touched on it a little bit, but in the Housewives, like, did you guys travel in the same circle? Like, how did you guys come together to write this book? Were you friends before?
Great question. We didn't get to that.
Yeah, we didn't get there. Or meet cute. Joe, do you want to say our meet cute? You're on mute.
We usually do it so early that
I know.
Yeah, it's funny we didn't get to that.
Yeah, it's usually one of the first questions we get asked. Christine was my editor on my last novel, Charlotte Walsh Likes to Win. And so we were like professional friends first, but we felt that spark that is kind of strange in adulthood. I think it's hard to make friends as a grown-up. I have to say, it's one of the reasons I moved back to Philly after being in San Francisco, because I grew up here, and I just like, it's like I moved into Melrose Place. Like all of my like college and high school friends live 3 blocks away from me with kids this kid's age. And Christina, sweetie, I'm swear he's been in the hospital all week actually with a scooter injury, and just got home a few hours ago. And as you can see, he's fully recovered.
Hi, well, welcome to your mom's show.
Yeah, this is not Charlie's first appearance at our Zoom, so he's a regular.
You guys are really lucky that he's wearing clothes. So Christine and I just loved working together, and we wanted to keep doing it and find another way to do it. And we did a quickie project together for, does anyone watch the TV show Younger? It's a sitcom and it's based in the world of publishing. And we wrote a book that was featured in the show called Marriage Vacation together. Christine was ostensibly the editor, but we had to write it in 4 weeks. And when you have to do something in 4 weeks, everyone is doing everything.
Yeah.
And then she approached me with this idea. She'd had this idea of something that should be a book for a long time, but she never thought she was going to be the writer necessarily. And so she came to me with this idea in late 2017. And
the olden days.
I like to say it was like a proposal, and I accepted her rose. And then we wrote the first 100 pages of the book in early 2018, and then sold it in fall of 2018. So I mean, just to put that in perspective, we turned it in spring of 2020, right before.
So this was kind of before we were locked up with the social justice movement.
Yeah, the olden days. Yeah, we started this book in 2018, which is like crazy to think of now. I mean, it was so long ago, and especially how the world has changed.
Yeah.
But you know what is interesting too? I mean, one of the things that we have talked about, and you know, Joe and I's friendship and becoming friends, and was certainly a factor with Jen and Riley in the book, and is, you know, kind of a real pressing question in our society today about interracial friendships, and can Black women and white women or people in general really be friends? You know, like, what does it take to have an authentic interracial friendship? And what's been really interesting in doing all these events, and society is still really segregated, right? So we do a lot of like white book clubs and Black book clubs, because, you know, your friendship circles, and that's how it shakes out. But that's a question on kind of both sides, right? Like, what does it mean to have a true interracial friendship? And that is something that we had to confront ourselves as new friends. Like, what is, you know, our interracial friendship going to look like, and what does that mean, and how close are we going to be? And in order to be close, what are the things that we're going to have to be open and vulnerable to talk about? And so, which is what Riley and Jen have to do on the page too.
I mean, I feel like I loved it, and it sort of spans so much more, like so many more relationships, you know, people, whether it's intimate relationships with a partner, friendships, best friends. But one of the things I loved about Riley and Jen is I really got a sense of their deep friendship bond, like from kids, the way they called each other like Pony and Puff, like it was such a great friendship that even, you know, that scene where Riley's mom was jealous of it. Like, and so it really, you were so involved and invested in making sure, like, are you guys going to make it? Are you guys going to make it? Is this going to be the big elephant in the room that sort of tears you apart? But I'm going to kick it off to Brianna Robinson, and then we'll do Chelsea's question. Please, someone ask about Corey. But ask your question for real, whatever it is.
Hi. I love the book. I have to admit, after I read the prologue, I actually intentionally had to stop reading it for a few days. I avoided it, and I found everything else possible to read except for the book. And then finally I was like, okay, Brianna, put your big girl panties on and read the book. From the beginning, it really made me think about my own friendship. One of my best friends, we actually met as adults, and we met because we started working together. And it's literally how we became friends. One day we just started talking in the lunchroom, and somehow we talked about hanging out and her taking me to a country bar. And
so what, to clarify, is this a white woman?
She's a white woman. She had just moved to Dallas. She's from Midland, Odessa.
I didn't want to make assumptions with the whole country bar thing.
She's from Midland, Odessa, and she came in, and she's in accounting. And we just randomly started talking one day, and somehow that led to us saying, hey, we should hang out. She drove from Fort Worth to pick me up in Dallas, and we Googled and found a country bar to go to. And we've been inseparable ever since.
I love that.
With that also came the uncomfortability of people looking at us crazy. What you hear about it all the time, when people look at people crazy when they do interracial dating, but they don't talk about it as much, was just friendship. And we had to go through a lot of that in our office setting. Her ex-husband, when I met her before she met him, and when they started dating, it was actually a day when I was to meet him for the second time, and he was going to bring a friend. And the irony of it was, his friend, although a black man, assumed I would be white.
Oh, that's fascinating.
He assumed I would be white. He was actually offended that I was not white. He didn't say it, but you knew. And then later she told me that she told me straight up that he told her, or he told her ex, that he assumed I would be a white woman. He didn't expect her to have a black friend. So that was an incident. And then we even had an instance where I was celebrating a birthday and she was supposed to come. She couldn't come. And I remember talking to my cousin, and my cousin wasn't sure if she could accept her as my friend because her previous experiences with white women or white people in general were not positive.
Yeah.
And I think that makes you go back to some of it actual racism, or is it more of an ignorance you have, right? Because sometimes we're in this bubble. We go to the school, and maybe the school we go to, everyone looks like us. We go to middle school, and a lot of people from grade school through high school, you go to a school a lot of times, depending on where you live, in the area where everyone looks like you.
Definitely.
And until you either go to college or leave the state or the city or go outside the country, you maintain that ignorance. I had a coworker, she had never really interacted with a black person or a person of color until she went to college, until she got one of her first jobs, because she said she was poor from a small town.
It's real.
And everyone looked like her. And so this book made me really think about the difficult conversations that me and my friend had to have. Just even in the last few years, like when the whole presidential election happened with Bush, with Hillary and Trump, we were completely on opposite sides of that. And that tested our friendship, because I hated the man and she hated Hillary. We both hated the people for completely different reasons. And so it was tough to discuss and to be able to have those questions. And then even now when you're having the Black Lives Matter movement, and you have people who expect you to be on one side or another.
Do you think you could have her read this book? Like, would you suggest?
Yeah, can you guys read it together?
I gave it to her last week and she told me she would read it.
Can we Zoom and have this conversation?
Yeah. It really, we even have it. She has 2 small daughters, and they just think of me as Auntie Bree, but even them as 4 and 5 have had people ask them. One of my goddaughters, because my goddaughters, picked up a black Barbie doll, and the older white cashier at Walmart was like, "Don't you want a Barbie that looks like you?" And that's what she asked the 4-year-old. And she said, no, she looks like my Auntie Bree. Because in her eyes, she didn't see that, it didn't matter to her.
And that's, I think, a big part of why their friendship, they started it at such a young age. Yeah. And, Riley has LaRoya has a quote in the book where she says, I didn't want to be the Black girl that was always talking about race, because, they just had this friendship. So I love that. And I love that you speak up for your, like, hey, listen, you find friendship in some unexpected places sometimes. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
I can't wait till she reads the books and tells me about it. But I will bring up Corey a little bit, only because it also reminded me, in my birthday this year, Amanda came, and my brother, who he currently lives in Southeast Saudi. was in town and he came and they actually connected. And the reason I brought it up is because they kind of connected. And I remember I mentioned it to one of my other friends, and she was like, I'm not even gonna lie, I'm kind of offended that your brother, who's successful and all that, is like liking your white friend. And it became a topic of discussion because she's old, a couple years older than me. So he's 30 to my 31, she's like 34. But some of my other friends didn't completely agree with it. And they were casual, but they were friendly and they liked each other. And I was just like, just neither one of y'all tell me about it.
Yeah.
I don't want to know if y'all do anything.
I'm like, race aside, that's weird.
I was like, don't do anything crazy. I don't want to know. If y'all are, I don't want to know what happened. Like, if y'all
hold on, you guys. I have to cut you off because we've only got a couple more minutes, because I know Joe has to go and Christine does. And I want to see if we can rapid fire some of the last remaining questions. And then of course we'll stay on for the after party if we didn't get to anything. But thank you guys. I love when you guys chime in.
Yeah, I know, this has been amazing.
Chelsea, I'm going to get you to unmic and ask your question, and then we'll try and get to Rashida as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chelsea. Thanks for the book choice, Tanya, and also for writing the book, authors. I have two questions. My first question is, I know this might come off as weird, but I've always been like interested in death and like what happens after death. So when I was reading the prologue, I'm like, wow, they really described death so well. Like, I don't know, did you guys have a near-death experience to like write? Like, I feel like a lot of authors come from experience. Or did you have to research it? Did you have to interview someone who, I guess, experienced a pre-death or something like that? And then my second question is about Corey. I wanted to know, what were the intentions in bringing him into the story? Was it to show that she's like a hypocrite? So those are two questions.
So for the near death, we actually didn't even like think about it or talk about it. I have no idea what Joe's stance is. Of all the things that we've talked about, I don't know what Joe feels about the afterlife at this point or what happened.
Oh, Christine, we learned something new about each other.
I know. I'm like, Joe, do you believe in heaven? I don't know. But also it's important to note that in this scene,
I don't know. Actually, wow, we're about to get really existential.
Yeah, we only have 5 minutes left. We don't have time. But we actually wanted to show more than, it's less about what happens kind of after this moment for Justin, because he does go to the hospital and there's a whole ordeal, but more so we were trying to capture this idea that life can change in an instant, right? And so he's just a really fully formed person on a regular afternoon with a family that loves him, you know, like as with any of us, and in particular in these circumstances of violence. And then suddenly, like, you know, on a dime, what happens? And so it's more, I think we were trying to go to his shock in the moment of like, I can't believe this is happening to me. And especially from a teenager's perspective where, you know, you haven't confronted your mortality at all yet, you know, like you haven't thought about those things. In terms of Corey, we were really intentional that we wanted to show Riley with a white man, mainly because we were trying to illustrate the difference between having a white friend and having a white boyfriend or love interest. There is a real difference there. And so what is that difference, right? Like the stakes are so much higher to some degree if you're thinking about settling down with or potentially having kids or building a life with the person. For whatever reason, that is different than having a white friend. And Riley doesn't even understand all those differences. Like she's trying to grapple with them as well, and grapple with this idea of, which we touched on a little bit earlier, where you can't anticipate necessarily who you're going to end up with. Like, you know, love is love is love. And I think she was kind of blindsided by this romance and then had to intellectualize it in a way, like, is he the right person and why? And what's going to happen? And what's our life in Riley's typical way? But sometimes you can't analyze yourself out of a relationship. And so we were trying to show that element too.
But she wants to. That's the
Go
thing.
ahead,
She
Joe.
tries so hard to. And we wanted to show that too. It's like, can you analyze yourself out of it?
Oh yeah, Riley felt like she was, because Corey was a bit perfect. Like even the nuances that you guys wrote, he was lovely, and he was the only person that she admittedly said, like, I don't have to pretend for, which was a big deal for her.
And irony, because he's this white man. I think she always thought that her guard would be down with somebody different. And yet I think we've all had those relationships in our lives where you can't explain your reaction to somebody else, the connection, the whatever it is. And we were trying to get at that too, you know. Like,
so I'm going to tell you something really funny. Like, we read the paragraph where you guys had that like little small sex scene where she was like, oh my gosh, I hobbled out of the bedroom the next day trying to, and like, I swear we're like 2-year-olds, or no, teenagers, I guess, because we literally laughed for hours. Like, the chat was going crazy about the hobbler and how like basically, no, it was so
I have to
funny.
tell you guys a side story about what's so funny about that, and Joe knows this, is that my dad was reading the book chapter at a time and then calling me at the end of every chapter to give his thoughts about the previous chapter. This is really early on. And I just had this anxiety about knowing what was happening. And even though it is, you know, in the grand scheme of things, a pretty modest sex scene, but I was still like, oh my God, my 80-year-old father is gonna call me after this chapter.
We loved it. We appreciate it. Okay, you guys, we are running out of time. We have 3 minutes left. And I have to let these ladies go on time, and we'll stay on and we'll chat and we'll continue. But I just want to thank you guys, because I think this book was really important to all of us. And I cannot stress to you enough, every time we would get online and talk about it, people would they would be like, thank you. I think I cried. I don't know. I had to put it down. And I just think this is the work that is so important for all of us. And just so many stories that were shared where people were taking it back to friends at work, sharing it with others. So I appreciate so much both of you for writing and opening up this topic, because I think fiction is really a beautiful way to walk in others' shoes and really understand what life means and what a life lived for, you know, people of other socioeconomic statuses, race, etc. Like, we're just so grateful, and we're so happy to have had you both here tonight.
Oh my God. Well, we have to say thank you to you and all you do for books. I mean, it's really nice to be able to have a forum where you can bring people together to talk about books. And, you know, as people who write books and love books and championing books, you know, that's really invaluable. And to like see the chat and the faces here and the questions, and, you know, we can't wait to see, I mean, we're so happy you picked We Are Not Like Them, but we can't wait to see what you do next too.
Okay. Well, we do have some like trite questions. If this could go to a screenplay, like, we love everything to go to Netflix or some streaming platform. Do you guys have like pictures or actors or celebrities in your head that you would envision for Riley, Jen, Corey? Because we've thought about this a lot.
Well, we want to hear all your thoughts, and please tell us on Instagram. The book has been optioned. We do have views, but that we can't say just quite yet.
We can keep it secret.
For the if all 100 of you pinky swear. No, but really, and look at our IGs. We're going to be announcing the TV news soon, but it's really exciting. And hopefully after all your brainstorming, you will agree with all of the casting choices that have been made. But as you might imagine, we're not going to go through random casting when we have real casting coming up. We shall see if they match.
Oh, that's so exciting. I feel like we pick some, like, pretty much most of the books we pick, I feel like go to screenplays. So we're gonna have to convert our book club to basically watching them together.
Oh yeah, we should meet back here after.
Yeah, we'll meet back here, or we could do a whole development meeting.
No, seriously, that's so exciting. And then as we kick off, like, what are you guys working on next? I have 2 questions. Are you writing something next? And what are the favorite things you're reading for each of you?
Joe, do you want to?
I do. I'm going to answer really quick, and then I'm actually going to disappear because there's only so much I can do. Only so many times I can hand him Google Earth on my phone, and he'll actually go away. I've also fed him 5 packs of fruit snacks. An amazing mother. We're working on a book together, another book together. It's halfway finished. It's called You Were Always Mine, and it explores race again in intimate relationships, but this time a Black woman who finds and fosters a white abandoned baby, and how that affects her life, her relationships, her marriage, and yeah, it's really great. And it's
like dramas.
Yeah, it's with 𝐻𝐢𝐿 at Simon & Schuster again, and we're so excited about it. And what I'm reading right now, so I just finished 2 books. One, Island Time, which is the new book from Georgia Lou Clark. And it's a modern romantic comedy, which is really lovely. And I finished School for Good Mothers too, which is a big
I just was about
hot
to read
book right now. And I've got thoughts. Christine and I actually disagreed.
Yeah, it's funny. So a lot of times we'll find that we're randomly reading the same book at the same time. So that was the case for School for Good Mothers.
Yeah, and I'm also reading Vladimir right now, which had a very sexy cover. And I read usually like 1 book a week. So I've usually got a lot teetering on the bookshelf, but everyone follow me on the IG. Keep me updated. Let me know if you have any questions. I'd love to hear from all of you. And sorry, I've got to go.
Go. You don't need to hear what I'm reading. I'll answer what I'm reading and then go.
Guys, you can unmute, literally unmute. Seriously.
Oh, I'm gonna wait. Can I take a Joe? I'm gonna take a quick pic.
Bye. I took a picture.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
And I recorded it. Okay, Christine, tell us what you're reading and
so
what.
Mine is I'm in LA for like 6 weeks, so my reading is limited. I was like, I'm going to bring 1 book that I can read instead of packing a whole bunch of books. So I'm reading Invisible Child by Andrea Elliot, which is I started when it first came out, and then I was like, I need to focus on this book. But she wrote a great New York Times piece, 10 years ago. She's reported the New York Times following this little girl named Dasani, who is homeless in New York. And she followed her story and her family for like 10 years and really paints a vivid portrait of both, her particular circumstances and her, really coming to life, but also tracing her family history then back to make all these connections that we were talking about, that in 2020 in New York, if you have, sort of a homeless Black child, what 50 years, 100 years before got her here. And it's wrenching, really wrenching, but very beautifully told. And, it's like 400 pages or whatever. So I really took like a nice hefty book with me here. So that's my current read.
Oh my gosh, Christine, thank you so much. You were a gem. Like
amazing.
We're all like super fans.
Super fans right back. It's like I said from the beginning, our dream to have conversations like this, and just that the book has touched people, and we always want to talk about it. And in COVID, it's just, everybody's feeling so isolated. So it's just nice to connect with people and new friends, and we're here for it. So thank you again. We can't, for having us. So grateful.
Thank you so much. Enjoy LA. And I definitely need a copy of your next book because we love twofers.
Of course.
Now
early copy is coming your way.
Yep.
You're 100%
now. 100%. And then like the next time you come back, it's like, hey girl, hey, we're just all
absolutely.
So thank you so much.
Enjoy the conversation. I want to know everybody's hot takes on Kanye, so I'll have to tune back in for that.
I literally needed, and you don't have to leave. I just feel like we digress into like a mess of like, girl, what are you talking about?
Since Joe and I are in the middle of a book, I have a chapter due to her tomorrow that I am actually going to go finish.
Thank you so much. Bye and good night.
Thank you guys so much. Good night. Thank you again. Really loved being here. Thank
you. You guys, welcome. Okay, you can unmic. Okay, let me just go. I feel like I should stop my recording here. It gets crazy now because there's like 100 of us on here, but we can figure it out. What did you guys think?
It was amazing.
That was awesome.
That was great.
So, I mean, it was hard because I've never had.
Amazing.
Oh, I love it. 2 authors. So I was like, we're going to need 90 minutes for sure.
It went very well.
Did we not cover anything?
Tanya, you did say that you had a surprise for them at the end. I'm not sure if you forgot or no. When we mentioned something about T-shirts or anything like
because
that.
LRGR Curves, who was on there with her mom, I was like, she makes our T-shirts of the hobbler. And I just don't think they realize like how, they even just hearing them, you don't realize how funny stuff is to us. Like when they're like, oh, they wrote this part of the story and it was just whatever. But like we spent a lot of time talking about the hobbler. It was hilarious.
That was hilarious.
I really wanted them to address why Jen never went to go see Gigi.